Welcome to Mystic Dragon Chronicles, where every tale holds a lesson. Beyond fantasy, lesson that last. Let's step into the story.
The smell of burning metal reached Daniel Reyes before the pain did. His shuttle spun through the thin sky of an unnamed moon, alarms screaming in the cockpit. Something had hit him hard, out near the cargo lanes, and now the ground was rushing up too fast. He pulled the controls with both hands, teeth clenched, and the little ship hit the dirt with a scream of tearing metal instead of a clean landing. Silence came after, then pain. Daniel blinked up at a cracked windshield and a sky the color of rust. His arm was bent wrong. Blood ran down his temple. He forced the hatch open with his good hand and fell out into loose gray soil, coughing from the smoke. Pirates. That was the only explanation. Raiders had been hitting supply runs near the frontier for months, and now they had caught him alone, far from any help. His comm was dead. His leg didn't want to hold his weight. He dragged himself away from the wreck in case it caught fire, using rocks and broken metal as handholds. Night fell fast on this moon. The air turned cold, and Daniel wrapped his jacket tighter, using a strip of cloth to bind the cut on his head. He had emergency rations in his belt pouch, a small medkit, and not much else. He forced down a painkiller and waited, hoping his beacon had gotten out a signal before it died. That was when he heard the sound. It was small and sharp, almost like a bird's cry, but with something wet and raw underneath it. Daniel froze, one hand on the knife at his belt. The sound came again, closer this time, from behind a broken ridge of orange rock. He should have stayed still and quiet. Instead, curiosity won over caution, the same stubborn curiosity that had gotten him into more trouble than he could count over the years. He crawled toward the sound, wincing with every movement of his bad leg. What he found made him stop breathing for a second. A nest, torn apart by the crash, lay scattered across the rocks. Broken shells, some old and some fresh, littered the ground. And in the middle of the wreckage sat a small creature, no bigger than a cat, with scales the color of polished gold catching the last light of dusk. Its wings were too small to fly, folded tight against its body, and one of them was bent at an angle that made Daniel's stomach turn. A dragon. A baby dragon, alone and hurt. He had heard stories about dragons living on the far edges of charted space. Tales traders swapped over drinks, but he had never actually believed they were real, let alone that he would find one bleeding beside his own wrecked shuttle. The hatchling hissed at him, baring teeth no longer than his fingernail, its whole body shaking. It was terrified. Daniel understood that feeling well enough right now. He didn't move closer right away. Instead, he reached slowly into his belt pouch and pulled out a ration bar, breaking off a piece and setting it on a flat rock between them. Then he sat back, as still as his pain would allow, and waited. The hatchling's nostrils flared. Its head tilted, gold eyes locked on the food, then on Daniel, then back again. Hunger won. It crept forward on unsteady legs, snatched the piece, and retreated a few steps to eat it in quick, nervous bites. "Guess your family didn't make it," Daniel said quietly, mostly to himself. The nest around them held no sign of adult dragons, only broken shells and scorch marks from the crash. Whatever had been guarding this hatchling was gone now. He tossed another piece of ration bar closer to himself this time. The hatchling hesitated, then came nearer, close enough that Daniel could see the small cut along the edge of its bent wing. Moving as gently as he could with his own throbbing arm, he reached for his medkit and pulled out a strip of synth bandage. The creature flinched at his touch, but did not run. It let out a series of small clicking sounds, watching him with sharp, intelligent eyes as he wrapped the wound with careful hands. When he finished, it pressed its small head against his knee, and something in Daniel's chest loosened for the first time since the crash. They stayed like that through the cold night, human and hatchling, sharing warmth and the last of the rations. Daniel drifted in and out of pain-filled sleep, and every time he woke, the little dragon was still there, curled against his side. Dawn broke pale and orange. Daniel heard the distant thrum of engines and forced himself upright, waving his good arm toward the sky. A rescue shuttle, sent after his beacon signal had gotten through after all, descended toward the wreck. As the medics rushed toward him, the hatchling let out a sharp, frightened cry and pressed itself against Daniel's jacket, small claws hooking into the fabric. "He's not leaving me," Daniel said. when one of the crew tried to gently pull the creature away. His voice left no room for argument, even weak as it was. "Wherever I go, he goes." The medics exchanged confused looks, but there wasn't time to argue with a bleeding man on a cold rock in the middle of nowhere. They loaded him onto a stretcher, and the hatchling climbed up beside him without being asked, tucking itself into the crook of his uninjured arm. As the shuttle lifted off the broken moon, Daniel looked down at the golden creature already falling asleep against him, completely unaware that this small, stubborn act of kindness was about to change everything for both of them, and for entire worlds waiting far beyond the stars they were leaving behind. 2 weeks after the crash, the medical wing of New Harbor Station had a new and very unusual visitor list. Daniel's arm was healing in a brace, his leg was mending slowly, and the golden hatchling refused to leave his room even for a minute. The staff had given up trying to remove it after the third failed attempt, when the creature had bitten a nurse's glove clean through and let out a screech that rattled the windows. Daniel called him Sonny, mostly because of the way morning light caught his gold scales and turned them almost too bright to look at directly. The name stuck fast, and soon half the station was using it too. Word of a tame dragon spread through New Harbor faster than any official report could travel. By the time Daniel was cleared to walk on his own, a line of curious colonists had already formed outside his door, along with a rather more serious group waiting in the hallway. 3 researchers from the colony's small science division, notepads and scanners in hand. "Mr. Reyes," said the lead researcher, a sharp-eyed woman named Dr. Patel, "do you understand what you've brought back with you? There are no confirmed records of a juvenile dragon ever being observed this closely. Most sightings are decades old, and always from a distance. Adult dragons are considered extremely dangerous." "He's not dangerous," Daniel said, glancing at Sonny, who was currently trying to steal a piece of toast off his breakfast tray with surprising stealth for a creature his size. "He's a baby." "That won't last," Dr. Patel said carefully. "We'd like permission to study him, understand his biology, his growth patterns. This could be one of the most important discoveries in colony history." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Study him how?" "Poke him with needles in a cage somewhere." "Observation only, at first," she said, though her tone suggested that was only the beginning of a much longer list. Daniel looked down at Sonny, who had abandoned the toast and was now staring up at Dr. Patel with narrowed golden eyes, as if he understood every word being said about him. Maybe he did. In the 2 weeks since the crash, Daniel had noticed things that unsettled him in a way he couldn't quite explain. Sonny learned commands faster than any pet should. He reacted to tone of voice, to facial expressions, even to arguments happening across the room. Once, when a supply cart crashed loudly in the hallway, Sonny had positioned himself between Daniel and the door before Daniel had even flinched. "He stays with me," Daniel said finally. "You can watch. You can take notes. But he's not going in a lab, and he's not getting locked in a cage. If that's a problem, take it up with the Colony Council." Dr. Patel studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Understood. For now." Over the following weeks, Daniel and Sonny became a familiar sight around the station. Sonny grew almost visibly, gaining a few inches every few days, his wings slowly strengthening as the bandage came off for good. He followed Daniel everywhere, curling up under his workbench during shifts at the cargo docks, riding on his shoulder through the market corridors, sleeping curled against his chest at night like an oversized, scaly cat. Colonists who had once been wary grew fond of the strange pair. Children would run up to see Sonny, and he seemed to enjoy the attention, puffing out his small chest and making soft chirping sounds that made everyone laugh. Even Dr. Patel's notes, which Daniel occasionally glimpsed, shifted tone over time, from clinical distance to something closer to genuine fascination. But not everyone was charmed. One evening, as Daniel walked Sonny along the observation deck overlooking the stars, a message came through on the station's public comm channel, requesting his presence at the council chamber. When he arrived, he found more than just the local council waiting for him. A tall figure stood near the observation window, wrapped in robes of deep blue fabric that shimmered faintly under the station lights. Its skin held a soft violet undertone, and its eyes, large and calm, fixed on Sonny the moment Daniel stepped through the door. "This is Ambassador Solen," the council leader said, looking a little nervous from the Threnna Accord. They've traveled a long way to see you, Mr. Reyes. And your companion. The ambassador took a slow step forward, studying Sonny with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read, something between reverence and disbelief. Do you understand? Solen said quietly. What you are holding? Sonny, perched calmly on Daniel's shoulder, tilted his head at the alien visitor and let out a small, curious chirp, as if asking the very same question right back. Daniel felt a chill settle over him that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. Whatever answer was coming, he had a feeling it was about to turn his entire world upside down. Ambassador Solen did not sit down right away. Instead, they circled slowly around Daniel and Sonny, studying the small dragon the way someone might study a piece of ancient art found in a place it should never have been. Please, the council leader said, gesturing to the chairs around the long table. Let's talk. Solen finally sat, folding long violet fingers together. Your species calls them dragons. We call them wardkin. In our oldest records, going back further than any written history your people have, they were guardians. Not pets, not beasts. Partners. Partners to who? Daniel asked, one hand resting protectively on Sonny's back. To a species long gone from the stars, Solen said. We do not know what became of them, only that they vanished, and the wardkin vanished with them, retreating to hidden places across the galaxy. Sightings since then have been rare. A few adults, glimpsed from a distance, never approached, never tamed. He's not tamed, Daniel said. He followed me. He chose to stay. Something shifted in Solen's expression, a flicker of surprise quickly hidden. That is exactly what our records describe. The wardkin do not follow orders. They choose a companion, and once chosen, the bond does not break easily. If what you say is true, Mr. Reyes, you may be the first being in recorded history that a wardkin has bonded with in thousands of years. The council chamber went quiet. Daniel looked down at Sonny, who was watching the ambassador with unusual stillness, gold eyes catching the light. Why does this matter so much? Daniel asked. He's still just a baby. Because the old stories say the bond changes both sides, Solen said. The companion grows stronger, sharper, more resilient. And the wardkin grows according to what it protects. If Sonny sees you, and by extension your people, as something worth protecting, he may grow into something far beyond what any of us have seen in living memory. Dr. Patel leaned forward. Grow how? Physically? Mentally? Both, Solen said. And there are darker chapters in our history too. Wardkin were hunted, long ago, for their scales, their blood, their bones. Some cultures believe consuming parts of a wardkin granted power, healing, even long life. Whether or not that is true, the belief alone was enough to drive hunters across star systems in search of them. If word spreads that a living, bonded wardkin exists here, on this colony, you may attract attention you do not want. The chill Daniel had felt earlier returned, colder this time. He thought about the pirates who had shot down his shuttle, the wreckage, the destroyed nest. It hadn't been random. It couldn't have been. You think that attack wasn't just bad luck, Daniel said slowly. Solen's expression darkened. I think it is worth investigating who exactly attacked your ship and why they were near a wardkin nesting ground in the first place. The council chamber buzzed with quiet, worried conversation after that. Some members wanted to quietly relocate Sonny somewhere hidden, away from public knowledge. Others argued that hiding him now, after word had already spread through the colony and beyond, was pointless. A few, quietly, wondered if the discovery could be used to the colony's advantage, a bargaining piece in trade talks with other systems. Daniel listened to all of it with a growing sense of unease, one hand still resting on Sonny's back, feeling the small dragon's heartbeat, steady and calm despite the tension in the room. In the weeks that followed, limited cultural exchange began between New Harbor and the Thrin Accord. Solen returned several times, bringing old texts and recordings, teaching Daniel fragments of wardkin history that had survived only in fading Accord archives. Sonny grew larger with each visit, now the size of a large dog, his golden scales taking on a faint shimmer that hadn't been there before. When he was excited or frightened, soft patterns of light would ripple across his scales, like something alive just beneath the surface. Dr. Patel documented every change carefully, her early caution replaced with quiet awe. He's not just growing, she told Daniel one evening. watching Sunny chase a beam of light across the research room floor. He's developing capabilities we don't have a name for yet. Daniel didn't need a scientific name for what he saw every day. He saw a creature that trusted him completely, that watched over him while he slept, that had begun, in small ways, to watch over the whole station too. But out beyond the edges of New Harbor's patrol routes, in the quiet dark between stars, something else was watching as well, and it was patient enough to wait for the right moment to strike. The message arrived on a routine cargo run, hidden inside a shipment manifest that should have contained nothing more exciting than spare parts and dried food supplies. Grant Okafor, head of New Harbor's small security division, found it during a routine inspection 3 systems away and brought it back himself rather than trust it to any comm channel. He requested an emergency meeting with Daniel, Dr. Patel, and Ambassador Solen the moment his ship docked. This was flagged during a supply seizure from a smuggling vessel, Grant said, laying a data slate on the table. Our people cracked their encrypted files. Take a look. The file showed a grainy image, but there was no mistaking it. A younger, smaller Sunny, curled in the wreckage of Daniel's crashed shuttle, taken from a distance, likely by a drone. Beneath it, a message written in a rough trade dialect, offering payment for a live specimen, and an even larger sum for scales, blood samples, or bone. This was sent out almost immediately after the crash, Grant said grimly. Whoever attacked your shuttle wasn't just raiding cargo, Daniel. They knew about the nest. Someone's been hunting Wardkin activity in this sector for a while now. Solen's expression turned hard as stone. This has the mark of the Kesari trade ring. They deal in rare biological material across a dozen systems. If they've confirmed a living, bonded Wardkin is here, they will not stop until they have him, one way or another. Daniel felt his stomach drop. Sunny, now large enough to reach Daniel's shoulders standing on all fours, pressed close against his leg, sensing the tension in the room before anyone said anything more. How much time do we have? Dr. Patel asked. Not much, Grant said. The smugglers we caught weren't the main operation, just couriers. If they were reporting back regularly and stopped without warning, the Kesari ring will assume something went wrong and move faster, not slower. The council was called into emergency session within the hour. New Harbor was not a wealthy colony. Its defenses consisted of a handful of aging patrol ships, a modest planetary shield array, and a security force better suited to handling smugglers and petty disputes than an org. We should consider relocating him, one council member argued, glancing nervously at Sunny. Quietly, before this escalates further, let another colony deal with the risk. Even if it puts everyone here in danger, the council member pressed. Before Daniel could answer, Solen spoke instead. If they take him and fail to secure him quietly, they will simply try again. The room fell silent. Daniel looked down at Sunny, who met his gaze steadily, gold eyes calm despite the fear rippling faintly across his scales in soft waves of light. We stay, Daniel said finally. We prepare. We fight if we have to. It was Grant who moved first to turn words into action, mobilizing every able body with combat or technical training. Old patrol ships were pulled from storage and refitted. The shield array was reinforced with spare parts scavenged from decommissioned freighters. Civilians who had never held a weapon in their lives volunteered for basic defense training, driven by a stubborn refusal to abandon. Sunny, sensing the shift in mood across the station, changed too. He grew restless at night, pacing near the windows, staring out at the stars with an intensity that unsettled Daniel more than any research report could. Once, during a defense drill, a training alarm blared unexpectedly loud through the corridors, and Sunny let out a sound Daniel had never heard before, deep and resonant, that seemed to vibrate through the floor itself. Dr. Patel, monitoring nearby, went pale. That reading, she said, staring at her scanner. That's not just sound. There's an energy signature behind it. He's not fully grown, and he's already producing output like that. Solen, watching from across the room, said quietly, the old texts warned of this. When a Wardkin's bonded companion is threatened, the Wardkin does not simply run or hide. It answers. Daniel looked at Sunny, now pacing anxiously near the window, watching the dark space beyond the station with sharp, unblinking eyes, and understood, with a growing sense of dread and strange hope both at once, that whatever was coming for New Harbor was not going to find an easy target waiting for them. The attack came 11 days later, in the dead hours of the station's night cycle, when the sky over New Harbor should have been empty and quiet. Warning klaxons tore through the corridors as sensor arrays lit up with contacts, 6 unidentified ships dropping out of hidden approach vectors, weapons already hot. Grant's voice crackled over every comm channel at once, sharp and urgent. All hands to defense stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Daniel was already moving before the alarm finished its first cycle, pulling on gear he had checked and rechecked a dozen times over the past week. Sonny was awake instantly too, ears back, wings flaring, a low growl building in his chest that Daniel felt more than heard. Stay close, Daniel said, though he suspected there was little chance of keeping Sonny anywhere but exactly where he wanted to be. Outside, New Harbor's small fleet of refitted patrol ships scrambled into formation, badly outgunned but unwilling to fall back without a fight. The shield array strained under the first volley of incoming fire, alarms shrieking as power reserves dropped faster than anyone had hoped. Daniel reached the command deck in time to see the enemy ships breaking formation, one peeling away toward the residential sector where families were being rushed into shelters, clearly aiming to create panic and draw defenses thin. They're going for the civilians, Grant snarled, redirecting what few ships he could spare. That was when Sonny moved. He shot past Daniel before anyone could stop him, wings snapping open, and launched himself through the open observation deck doors into open space, protected by nothing but the atmospheric field at the station's edge. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. Sonny. But Sonny was already gone, a streak of gold light against the black sky, moving faster than anything his size should have been able to move. He collided with the lead raiding ship's shield with a burst of shimmering energy, and the vessel spun wildly off course, its weapons systems sparking and failing. On the command deck, sensors screamed with readings no one could fully explain. Energy signatures spiked around Sonny in pulsing waves, and where those waves touched New Harbor's own struggling defenses, something strange happened. Shield strength surged. Weapon systems that had been sluggish moments before responded crisp and fast. Pilots later swore their reflexes had never felt sharper, their aim never truer, as if something invisible was steadying their hands. Whatever he's doing, Dr. Patel shouted over the noise, eyes locked on her readings, it's not just protecting him. It's protecting all of us. Daniel didn't wait to understand it fully. He grabbed a rifle and ran for the nearest defense point, joining the scattered line of colonists and soldiers fighting to hold the residential sector. Explosions rocked the corridors. Smoke filled the air. But every time fear threatened to take hold, that same strange, steadying calm swept through, and people who had never fired a weapon before found themselves moving with unexpected precision. Outside, Sonny fought like something out of the old stories Solen had shared, a blur of gold light and raw, untamed energy, slamming into enemy ships, disrupting their systems, drawing fire away from the station itself even as damage began to show along his own scales. He's taking hits, Grant said grimly, watching the display. He can't keep this up forever. Neither could New Harbor. 2 patrol ships were already disabled, drifting uselessly at the edge of the battle. The shield array flickered, dangerously close to collapse. Then Ambassador Solen's own small diplomatic vessel, previously docked and thought to be unarmed, suddenly powered up weapons systems no one on the station had known it carried, joining the fight alongside New Harbor's battered fleet. The Accord does not abandon a Wardkin bond. Solen's voice crackled over the emergency channel, calm even amid chaos. Nor those who protect one. The combined effort turned the tide. Caught between a wounded but furious Wardkin, a colony fighting with unnatural precision, and unexpected Accord firepower, the raiding force broke formation, their commander clearly realizing the easy target they had expected did not exist. As the last enemy ship turned to flee, Sonny let out a final burst of light, disabling its engines before it could jump away, leaving it stranded and helpless for New Harbor's remaining ships to secure. Then, abruptly, the golden light around him faded, and Sonny began to fall. Daniel didn't remember running. He only remembered reaching the observation deck as emergency crews pulled Sonny's limp form back through the atmospheric field, scales scorched, wings battered, eyes barely open. "Stay with me," Daniel said, kneeling beside him, voice breaking. "Stay with me, Sonny." Weak, exhausted, but alive, Sonny pressed his head against Daniel's hand, and somewhere beneath the pain and the smoke and the ringing silence after battle, Daniel felt something that had nothing to do with fear at all. Relief, pride, and an unshakable certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. Sonny slept for 3 full days after the battle, curled in a nest of blankets in Daniel's quarters, while Dr. Patel monitored him around the clock, insisting she needed sleep far less than she actually did. The station, meanwhile, could not stop talking. Footage from the battle had spread fast, first through New Harbor's own network, then, thanks to Solen's diplomatic channels, across the wider Thran Accord and beyond. A small frontier colony, defended by ordinary settlers and a young wardkin, had driven off an organized raiding force that should have overwhelmed them easily. It was the kind of story that traveled on its own, gathering weight with every retelling. When Sonny finally woke, stretching stiff wings and blinking sleepily at Daniel's worried face, the first thing he did was let out a small, hungry chirp, as if the past 3 days of near-death heroics were already old news. Daniel laughed, relief crashing over him so hard his eyes stung. "Yeah," he said, rubbing a hand over Sonny's scaled head. "Let's get you some food." Recovery came quickly after that. Within a week, Sonny was back to trailing Daniel through the station's corridors, though colonists now stepped aside with a mix of gratitude and quiet, or rather than simple curiosity. Children waved at him from doorways. Off-duty soldiers who had fought beside his strange, steadying energy during the battle nodded respectfully whenever he passed. Ambassador Solen requested a formal meeting once Sonny was fully healed, this time with representatives from several Accord member worlds joining remotely, their faces displayed across the council chamber's main screen. "What happened here will not stay contained to this system," Solen said, addressing both the council and Daniel directly. "The Accord wishes to formally open relations with humanity, not as distant neighbors, but as something closer. Partners." A representative from an insectoid Accord world leaned forward. "The bond witnessed here, between your kind and a wardkin, has not been recorded in millennia. Other dormant wardkin nests may exist, scattered across systems none of us have fully explored. If humanity is capable of forming such bonds, this could reshape relations across a significant portion of known space." Dr. Patel, seated nearby with a data slate full of Sonny's growth records, added quietly, "And Sonny's not finished growing. Whatever he becomes, it's going to matter, far beyond New Harbor." The council chamber buzzed with quiet excitement and no small amount of nervous uncertainty. Trade proposals, cultural exchange programs, and cautious military cooperation agreements were all raised within the hour, more diplomatic movement in a single meeting than New Harbor had seen in years of quiet isolation on the frontier. Daniel listened to all of it, Sonny curled comfortably at his feet beneath the table, and found himself thinking not about grand galactic politics, but about a cold, broken moon, a frightened hatchling, and a piece of ration bar shared between 2 lost, wounded strangers. "They're offering you a formal position," Solen said afterward, finding Daniel alone on the observation deck later that evening, watching the stars with Sonny beside him. "Liaison between humanity and the Accord. Few humans will ever be offered such influence." Daniel considered it for a long moment. "Maybe someday," he said finally. "But right now my job is right here. Raising him. Making sure New Harbor stays safe. That's enough for me." Solen studied him with an expression that might have been respect, or perhaps simple understanding. The old stories say the wardkin choose companions who will shape history, whether that companion seeks such things or not. It seems the stories were right once again. Weeks passed, then months. Sonny grew steadily, his wings strong enough now for real flight, taking him soaring above New Harbor's domes each morning while colonists below paused their work just to watch. Reports trickled in from other frontier colonies, whispered sightings of strange creatures near old, forgotten nesting grounds, sparking fresh waves of curiosity and hope across human space. One clear morning, months after the battle that had nearly cost them everything, Daniel stood on the observation deck with Solen beside him, watching a handful of unfamiliar ships approach New Harbor's docking bay, representatives from distant systems eager to see for themselves the colony where a wounded man, and a lost hatchling had changed the shape of galactic history. Sunny landed beside him with a soft thud, wings folding neatly against his now impressive frame, and pressed his head affectionately against Daniel's shoulder. "Ready for visitors?" Daniel asked quietly. Sunny let out a low, contented rumble, golden eyes reflecting the light of a new dawn breaking gently over the colony they had both fought so hard to protect. Somewhere out among the stars, other nests waited, other bonds yet unformed, and an entire galaxy was only just beginning to understand that the future would belong not to the strongest alone, but to those willing to share warmth with a stranger on a cold and broken night.